Good afternoon. Let's open up the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners. Only meeting this week happens to be November 18th, 2024. And citizen input is first on our agenda. Is there anyone in the room? Is there anyone with a raised hand online? No. Okay, all right. So then let's look at our consent agenda. And the first item on consent is from OSU 4-H. So that will be convened under that body as the governing body.
Or can just do one motion.
Oh, we may.
approving the
I knew I had it on my
agenda, as long
notes
as
and
we've
then I didn't
noticed
think
it. Yeah, we've noticed it appropriately on the agenda.
Okay.
Indicating how you guys are taking action.
All right. So we do have 8 items on consent then. Is there a motion?
Little bit of discussion on some of these items, but I mean, I can move consent to agenda and then we'll just talk.
Okay,
Second,
all right, and a discussion, please.
so with this packet for 4-H extension, it's the draft at the back that's being changed from document in the front. I mean, it wasn't obvious what the 2013 and then the draft is for the new one.
Correct.
And then it looks like it's going from 7 to 5. Is that the one of the structural pieces here? I don't know.
That's
I don't know
correct.
if you're, if you're.
I was
can
not involved in
represent,
this,
yeah.
but at the same time, it's basically 4-H, the extension office sent it to us, and the only duty of the body is that under the law, you have to, as a governing body, you have to approve it.
Yep.
But they were the ones who made the changes.
Yeah, so I hadn't heard about it before this, but it looks like that. And then the last little statement on there is to say nothing big deal, but in the event of dissolution, all council assets shall revert to OSU Extension Service for use in Deschutes County. So this is the special district. We have a contract with OSU Extension, basically send all the resources there. But is this? I don't know, giving away the, because we've got property, building and operations over there. As I said, I just had questions. So,
Yeah,
and I don't think there's any dissolution on the horizon here, but is that the right statement? The event of dissolution, all council assets shall revert to OSU Extension.
yeah, we weren't involved in the drafting of these other than just presenting it. I don't know what buildings they have other than the lease that they have with.
Yeah, so as I say, I guess from my fellow commissioners, any insight into this, or, I mean, I don't see anything controversial, I just didn't have any information for things.
Yes, they've definitely printed out the original document.
Yeah, I mean. These advisory councils exist to support extension, so I don't have any concern about the council's assets. Reverting to extension. If it dissolves.
And that's fine, I mean, I was just trying to get clarity in here, okay, so. The next item, the secure residential treatment facility, talks about requirements in place till 2044. And this is just kind of logistics of this, as in. I have a hunch that they'd be able to. Utilize and kind of consume those $2 million pretty quick. So does this really have to stay in place till 2044?
That was a condition of the grant funds. Obviously, the funds would be provided to them on build out. But then if they cease operations during that time period of the 20 years, or basically from 26 to 44, I think it's prorated at $100,000 per year
Okay,
that they would pay back the grant funds.
that's fine. Yeah, I was just thinking, it's probably gonna be, we consume these dollars and now we've got this overhead. I'm thinking as a business owner, but this is protecting the grant funds.
Correct.
So,
So
That's
that we
fine.
can secure the operation. period of time.
I think that was all I had, was just 2 questions.
Okay, anything else?
I mean, while we're talking about that item, I'll just say. I am super excited that we are going to have another secure residential treatment facility in our community. This innovative public-private partnership with Jackson House, it's really apparently this is the way that we're going to get this done. You know, there have been earlier efforts to get another secure residential treatment facility in our community that struggled. So it is a great, in my mind, it's a great thing to have this partnership opportunity to invest these $2 million into and get a desperately needed secure residential treatment facility for to serve the people of Deschutes County. Just
Would it be appropriate to have Holly come up and just also your good news on Friday at our behavioral health meeting when you said the children's facility that's being worked on, we're looking at like, what, 15 beds now instead of 6?
It's still early conversations, but yes.
Yes.
And we're also working with Jackson House around that project as well. So, you know, lots of details still to be worked out around that, but the secure residential treatment facility, it's very exciting. We've only had 16 beds in our community for, I don't know, 20 some odd years. We've never had any other secure residential facility. We've struggled, they're expensive to build. So to have this partnership has been the way to get it done, and it will double our capacity. So it will make a huge difference, particularly for our civilly committed population, our aid and assist population, and it will be massive. So then in line with that, the child facility, we're still working very much towards getting that up and running. Very good momentum on that project, working with Jackson House around ideas and modeling for that. We are potentially looking at like a 15-bed, what's referred to as PRTS, psychiatric treatment residential. I can't remember what it stands for right off the top of my head. It's more acronyms, but also hopefully being able to create some type of crisis respite opportunity as well for children. So that is moving along. We're going to get some numbers back, working with OHA on that. Hope to get some proposals here soon and get that going.
Regardless of what John Collins said a couple months, last month at the meeting, that beds don't count, they do count.
We need beds. We need beds in our community. We need,
Yes.
this side of the mountain is, if you look at the map of residential capacity across the state, we are way under resourced in our area. So this is a step in the right direction.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, this is where legislative support can sure come in, because I know the Deschutes Recovery Centers, it's a secure residential treatment facility, but Deschutes County built it.
Yeah.
So as I say, we're building these things locally in the community. The model is to manage in the community, which is wonderful, but if we don't have legislative support to help keep this going, you know, strings like what we just saw in that previous one, we're gonna give you $2 million, we're gonna keep you, put the pressure on for 20 years, which I'm just advocating for legislative support.
I'll always take legislative support.
Yep.
I mean, to kind of unpack that a little bit, you know, this expect. I'm glad that we get a 20-year commitment that they're gonna operate, you know, for the funds that we're turning over. But, you know, it would be helpful to have an understanding of, you know, what is the business model for operating a facility like this? I mean, how much Medicaid or OHP funding is coming in, and you know, how much other funding from other places is coming in to actually make it viable to operate.
It's primarily a revenue generating operation. So they've modeled it out. The rate for secure residential is substantial enough that if it stays full, then they make their money, they cover their costs. The 2 million is really kind of towards getting it built, but also helping kind of this first 1 or 2 years as they build up their model and get referrals going and get that stabilized. But it should be a self-sustaining model. Once they get through that. Staffing is always the challenge with any of these facilities, so we'll see how that plays out. But the rates need to keep up with the staffing. So that's where the state and legislature could be really helpful, is making sure our rates don't stay stagnant.
And our existing SRTF, I mean,
Yes.
the recovery center, they are
Full all the time.
full all the time.
Full all the time.
And it's working for
Oh,
them
yes.
in terms of operating revenue.
Yes, and they actually would have, you know, they would have built another one. It's just the money to build these facilities is substantial. And the state gave us 2 million, which doesn't even, not a drop in the bucket for what it costs to actually build these. So that's where it can be a challenge.
He actually built one in Hermiston a couple of years ago, and I believe it, they had sold it for 5 million to Community Solutions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one, and it was really a lovely facility in Hermiston. So I
Nice.
think it was built in like 1920s,
Oh, great.
2020 or something.
And community, they do great work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, but, you know, we desperately need more facilities on
We
this
do.
side of the mountain.
We do.
Probably on the other side too.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So just for understanding, when you say sustainable, billing back
Bill.
state, and federal.
Medicaid. Yeah, mainly Medicaid. And so that's they set the rates high enough in these secure facilities because of the staffing ratios and the requirements to operate them, that they, their modeling is dependent upon those rates. And staying full is part of it, and that's not an issue here.
I don't think that would be a problem.
I don't think it'll be a problem either.
No,
But the rates.
Yeah.
The rates. need to keep-
The rates need to keep up, and that's a constant conversation we're having in the
Yep,
legislature.
keep up,
Keep it
yeah.
up, yeah.
and I do want to,
Thank you.
thanks. I do want to acknowledge and thank Jim Pfister for continuing to serve on our Deschutes County Budget Committee. So calling for the vote, Mr. DeBonne
Yes,
and Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So let's now go to item number 9. 4.3.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Hallie King, Associate Planner with Community Development. This next item is the second reading for ordinance number 2024-011, which is the board approval of the Core 3 Comprehensive Plan Amendment, Zone Change and Urban Growth Boundary Expansion. To remind the Commissioners, we held a first reading for this ordinance on November 4th, 2024, where Chair Dare and Commissioner Chang voted to approve first reading. With no changes requested at that first reading. So again, now we're back here with second reading. And note again, no changes in the packet, and if the, unless there's any questions, staff would recommend a motion to adopt the second reading by title only.
Question.
None? There a motion then?
Yeah, I'll move approval of second reading of ordinance number 2024-011 by title only.
and I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes, moving approval of second reading of ordinance number 2024-011 by title only, and ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan to adjust the Redmond Urban Growth Boundary and Comprehensive Plan designations for certain properties, and Title 18, the Deschutes County zoning map to adjust zoning for certain properties. So then we need adoption motion.
I'll move adoption of ordinance number 2024-011.
Second.
Any further discussion? Calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang, DeBonne. You made the
Yes,
motion. And Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, moving adoption of ordinance number 2024-011. So thank you.
Commissioners. Thank you.
We now go to item number 10.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator. Joining me at the table will be Amy Fraley, the City of Bend.
welcome.
Amy is the Senior Program Manager for Houselessness Solutions. On October 23rd, the board passed a joint resolution with the City of Bend City Council. The joint resolution created the temporary safe stay area northeast of Bend, or what is commonly referred to as Juniper Ridge. A key component of the temporary safe stay area is to fund housing-focused case management services. And the resolution that was passed contemplated an IGA between the City of Bend and Deschutes County to fund this housing-focused case management. So for your consideration today is the IGA between the City of Bend and Deschutes County. The IGA has the county sending $400,000 of county ARPA funds, or what used to be county ARPA funds, but have been reprogrammed. About $400,000 of those ARPA funds to the City of Bend. And then the City of Bend will match those with city ARPA funds. And these are ARPA funds that are originated with the city. They aren't the ARPA funds that the city received from the county. But the IGA calls for both the city and the county to put forward $800,000, and the city will contract with service providers to provide housing-focused case management services for about the next 2 years at Juniper Ridge. I've been working with Amy on the IGA. The city has a few formatting changes to what was in the board packet. We can handle that between the staff. But the main thing is for the board to review kind of the programmatic piece of the IGA, which is page 2 of the IGA and page 207 of the board packet. I'll get over to Amy to see if there's anything she'd like to add.
That was perfect. I'm just here to answer any questions. Hopefully, commissioners, you received a copy of the presentation that was provided to council on November 6th that laid out the framework for the housing focused case management at the TSSA.
And the city's effort includes for other housing services that are in the city council presentation with safe parking and other pieces.
That's correct.
So that concludes the staff report. You're seeking board approval for county administrator signature on the IGA.
Well, I'm excited to be moving ahead with this stage of the temporary safe stay area project. Thinking beyond this step of just putting these monies together between the city and county, I'm concerned about finding service providers who are ready and able to do this work. I mean, do we have any sense yet from the service provider community whether when we put out the RFP for this, there's actually going to be any responses or not?
So if it's all right, what we did on November 6th, or what council did, was put forward a houseless services grant program that included the TSSA. And of those providers that attended those informational sessions, we've had 2 so far. That'll be open until December 7th. The providers that are already working in that area to provide some kind of services, we've had 2 apply. And we're hoping that the other providers that are out there will also put in an application for that 800,000 for housing focused case management. If we don't see those folks come forward, we are absolutely willing to put some more inquiries out there.
And is your vision that you would have more than one
Yes,
contracted entity?
That's correct.
Multiples?
yes. We'd like to believe that if COVO, is the appropriate case manager or case management organization for a camp, there may be another camp that is better served, for instance, by Reach or by Shepherd's House Sheravan. And so our intent, we have initial conversations going on with Neighbor Impact to manage the information and the HMIS data to make sure that we're not duplicating any kind of services or count. And then we'll be bringing forward information and metrics monthly or because you had said, I know
He said 2 every 2 weeks.
every 2 weeks, but I think what we were talking about initially is that services be every other week.
What we
And
could do is
then,
Commissioner DeVon asked for a report every 2 weeks. Of course, it'd go to the full board, but what we could do is do the report every 2 weeks and then once a month it'll.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, between now and next May is a big, step, right? And there's only half a dozen, maybe 7 months between now and then. So that's 7 months of reports, and I'm not looking for a big overhead here, but we know this many people, we've, offered this, this many people have moved out, whatever. But yeah, I'm just thinking we need to keep it top of mind for this next 7 months or so.
we have been very clear in the grant application that those metrics are included and are to be provided monthly, which is the same cadence that we do with the other shelters that the city supports, and then it's published on our website, on our data hub.
So you didn't mention Central Oregon Villages at this moment?
Central Oregon Villages.
Right, they weren't one that applied, then you said what, Cobo?
No, what I was saying is those were examples.
Okay,
And
so you're
so-
not saying exactly who has. applied.
No, I'm not.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that we do have the capacity in the community, because honestly, we need the 4 days a week.
Yes, and that is, the budget is built around those 4 touches per
Right.
week. Mhm. And a 60% engagement rate.
Exactly, so. And do we even have a count? Is it appropriate at this moment in time to ask if, is it BioSolutions, if they're going to be working over on the other side of the railroad tracks then?
It is my understanding, yes, but that is not, I'm just the program person.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, because they seem to know really what is
Absolutely.
going on. I had an incredible conversation with them and
Yeah.
they had not been working over there, and so the counts over there seemed to be a little sketchy at times.
We cast a really wide net with 280 individuals, knowing that there may be more than that living in a specific camp, but that was certainly on the high end of all of our counts. And so at that 60% engagement rate at the.
High end. 280 is your high end, okay?
Yes,
Okay,
knowing that there may be minor children that may not receive services, but could be provided services through an adult in the camp as well.
Couple other thoughts, population might go up at some point instead of going down because it's a defined area. And I'm not judging or asking or whatever, but it'd be a shame if we find out 30 days later that we've grown this instead of 2 weeks. So I'm just advocating for 2 weeks again. Also, the date that nobody is east of the tracks, we're talking about May, it'd be nice to know if it's gonna happen a little bit before that or right on time. So as I say, I just feel like a monthly report's gonna keep me a little bit disconnected from the current status. So those are the kinds of things I've been looking for. Also remember, registered, vaccinate dogs. I mean, that's serious business. We already had a death out there. So, if there's an evaluation of we estimate this many dogs, we have service providers offering registration and support and vaccination support. That's a deliverable, that we're gonna get to at some point. So just saying, those are the kinds of things I'm thinking of.
Okay. So for instance, if the animal vaccination was a barrier, so when we're talking about housing focused
Everything's
case.
carrier, obviously.
Very true. And so it would just need to be articulated in an initial service plan as to how that cost could be rolled into housing focused case management. And so there's certainly a thread.
As I said, this is just me asking for this and it's just deliverable. I mean, we've got
Absolutely.
cultural norms and community expectations and laws that we're not following, so I'm trying to figure out where can we bring this up.
To be very frank, getting information, data and getting those counts and those hours, it takes capacity of providers, and our provider network is often pretty stressed as far as time. And so I'm very comfortable saying that we can gather that information on a monthly basis. We can bring anecdotal information every 2 weeks, but those hard numbers through HMIS would probably be a monthly report.
I was just sharing thoughts in my head about what I think.
Commissioner Chang and I did get a very interesting email from someone yesterday, I believe it was, all about when we've let people that haven't had to follow the law or the rules and what they've done, and where in California where the rats were taking over, the homeless. And so it's a balance, and not everyone is gonna wanna follow it, but we definitely, I believe we just had another fire out there. And, according to Ven Fire, that would make it like number 80 of the fires, transient fires in this year to date. So I don't know, it was Harvey or something that caught on fire, I believe.
Yeah, the camp that's near one of the hygiene stations.
Okay, it's on county, that one was on county property
Yes.
then?
So we're working with BioSolutions to clean it up immediately.
Okay.
So,
It's just kind of thinking out ahead along another line. Are we concerned that as salespeople are moved out of the east of the tracks area, and then eventually out of the other area, are we concerned that a lot of those people are going to China Road?
Focus is housing. So of course, always concerned about people not moving into more permanent housing, but being displaced and going somewhere different. That's also not suitable for human habitation for a long period of time. Or survival camping. The hope is by providing this service that they are more likely to move into more permanent housing. I think we will have to wait to see if that comes to fruition or if that concern is something that we need to address in another way. The housing focused case management dollars that are specific to outreach within this greater grant program could in theory be used also at China Hat. And so even if somebody moved from the TSSA, which is only this $800,000 from the match, that case management could follow them into another place and hopefully prevent them from going to China Hat and finding a more appropriate placement instead.
Amy, do you have any update on Old Mill Inn and Suites? I know there's 76 units there.
From what I understand, though, I have not checked with COIC or the MAC group, so I do understand that 2 households from Central Oregon Villages were making a transition into Old Mill Inn and Suites, and that there were another 2 that were potentially moving into Old Mill Inn and Suites. I believe that Reach also had 2 to 3 clients that were on the precipice of going into Old Mill Inn and Suites, and so those are the only providers that I've talked to
So
specifically.
that's maybe like five of the units would be taken.
I'm not sure to be.
Okay,
perfectly
no,
honest.
I was just wondering.
I've heard progress is being made and people are going in, so we're really excited about that resource, and that of course would be hopefully where folks are transitioning.
Okay, so Central Oregon Villages, right? And I know that at Oasis Village, they were actually in Redmond, out of your area. They were looking for places for some of those residents who were ready to move on, and they just hadn't found them yet. So, okay, well, thank you for that update on that.
And like I said, that's only 2
I know.
providers that I happen to talk to, so it could be far more than that. Those are just the ones that I know.
Good.
I'll just say, I'm still concerned, we wouldn't be exploring. We wouldn't be exploring managed camps, we would be exploring temporary safe stay areas if there was abundant for shelter and housing for people to go to right now. So yeah, I just flagging that
Absolutely.
that we I was tracking that cabin view hazardous fuels reduction project on the Deschutes National Forest that's going to be moving through that area, and it'd be really unfortunate to be pushing more people to China Hat at the same time that they're trying to clear out areas to get the work done.
We did add another safe parking site last month, and we expect there to be at least
How many
6
sites at that one?
That would 3.
3, okay, 3 more.
And then we've got the 6 that are coming on at Dean Swift that we expect to be available before the end of the year.
Right,
And then Mountain View Community Development is also exploring some safe parking, and I think COV even has another site that they're looking at. So there's small steps, but there are a couple more beds. We also expect the Navigation Center to transition back into their renovated space in the next couple of weeks. And so while we're hoping that the Franklin Avenue Shelter, which is at the Rainbow and has been housed in the back of the building, will be able to take a little more space, it could create a couple of more beds in the front of that building.
so Navigation Center, a couple more weeks, you say?
Yes, by December 1st, they will be out of the former Blue Dog RV site, which is where they have been running day services, and will be back at their permanent location on 2nd.
Okay. There's someone that's gonna make a motion?
Move to approve county administrator's signature of document number 2024-888. An intergovernmental agreement between the city of Bend and Deschutes County to fund housing focused case management at the temporary safe stay area.
I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Chang,
Yes.
Mr. Devon,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming today. Okay, Nicole, Will?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, Senior Planner with Deschutes County Community Development. And I do just have a very brief PowerPoint today. Let's share my screen. So I'm here today to give you an update on the state's efforts to update the Greater Sage Grouse maps. So for those who may not be familiar, who might be listening in 2010, sage grouse was identified as a candidate species for the Endangered Species Act by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department, as in kind of sort of through an agreement to avoid listing it completely. The Western states agreed to adopt conservation and assessment strategies and habitat maps, and also development regulations to protect sage grouse habitat. So in 2011, the initial version was adopted by the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission, which was then incorporated into the Oregon Administrative Rule by Land Conservation and Development Commission in 2015. So that essentially established 3 different habitat areas for sage grouse. So core, low density, and general habitat areas that were required to have protections as part of development processes when they're within 3.1 miles of a lek, also known as the strutting grounds for sage grouse. That OAR requires 7 Eastern Oregon counties, including Deschutes County, to implement that rule, those requirements, and to implement those maps. So unlike other inventories that the county has, I'll use the example of mule deer, this comes from the state. We don't really have any flexibility in changing those maps. We have to implement them directly. So through that, we established our Greater Sage Grouse Combining Zone, and that was voluntary, but essentially was just helpful for property owners to see more specific data about the sage grouse habitats. The statewide maps are pretty generic. So we established that mostly for clarity for property owners. So wanted to note that currently that applies primarily to Eastern Deschutes County. Most of the private land in that area is zoned for exclusive farm use, and we see very limited development activity in those areas to date since 2015. In 2022, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife initiated an update process to update that conservation and assessment strategy and their habitat maps. They had some new information from collaring sage grouse, so some specific info from actually having collars on the birds to be able to understand their movements and the leks and kind of their general migration areas. So they still have not produced an updated copy of that conservation and assessment strategy. I just wanted to note that, but they did go through the process to formally adopt those maps. So wanted to note that they released the initial draft in July of last year. We provided an update to the board at that time, noting some of the key differences between our existing map and that 2023 data. And there's also an open house in Bend that I attended, and there were a couple other agencies and property owners at that meeting.
Back up a few steps, they didn't publish something, I was maybe defocused for a moment there, but yeah, what was that statement?
Yeah, so so ODF&W, to incorporate this new collaring data, they produced a new set of maps, and they're planning to adopt them in December of 2023. So they notified Deschutes County. We held an update work session with the board, and ODF&W held an open house at Bend to provide info on the maps.
But the maps haven't been officially adopted yet, is that what you were saying?
So Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, they've completed the first of 2 steps. So in December of 2023, the maps were adopted by the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission. But now we're in step 2, which is the Land Conservation and Development Commission hearing process. So the maps have been adopted, but they're not in Oregon Administrative Rule, so they don't yet apply to development. So that's where we are today. Why I wanted to include some of the information though on the ODF&W process is they had the opportunity for property owners to contest the maps. So they sent out notice to property owners and the county, but they had a very heavy disclaimer on that information that said, you can contest these maps if you can provide biological evidence that they're incorrect. So a property owner couldn't say, I haven't seen a sage grouse up out here, or I don't want to be in this mapped area. you would have to have provided specific evidence from a biologist. So pretty high bar to contest those maps. So where we are now, again, is that these maps need to be integrated into the Oregon Administrative Rule. We've been coordinating with DLCD for about a year on this process. They've just been very, very short-staffed. They've had a lot of work to do, so that's why there's been about that year delay. But they sent us notice a few weeks ago that they're planning to hold the hearing to adopt these maps on January 23rd. Which will again incorporate those into administrative rule. And then as part of that, we're preparing as the county to update our local combining zone to reflect that new information following their adoption. Just wanted to note some of the key changes. So we had presented the previous version of the map, 2023 map, in July of last year. We got a new data set a few weeks ago from DLCD. We compared that data, our GIS analyst Tim Berg compared it. And there's no change with the exception that the Milliken Rural Service Center has been excluded. So they're not in a sage grouse habitat area. And you can see on this map, the little circle carve outs, those are all of our rural service centers. So Milliken, Brothers, and Hampton. And the thinking behind that was that those were historically developed areas. So they received kind of a carve out from those requirements. Overall, we're seeing, compared to the 2015 maps, we're seeing an overall decrease in the acreage that covers the sage grouse combining zone in Deschutes County. So about 27,000 acres of mostly general habitat is being removed. So those properties are no longer in that combining zone. And for non-federal land, so that's anything other than federally owned lands, that includes private, county, and state land. We're seeing a decrease in the number of tax lots, but a slight increase in the number of acres. So there are some properties that are being excluded, but also some properties that are now being included that previously weren't mapped. So that is a change of about 10,000 acres or so of non-federal land that's increasing.
So the actual number on here changed on your handout than what we were given.
Yes, thank you. I was just about to mention that. So I
was like going, oh.
I appreciate you catching that. Yeah, so I apologize. The table that was in the memo was from those July 2023 maps. So with the exclusion of the Milliken areas, it's now 10,878 instead of what was in the memo, which was about 11,000.
And the 10,878, was that general habitat as well that was added, or was that other kinds of?
That was overall. So I believed it was general habitat, but also some core and low density. And so I can kind of provide a little bit more detail on that. So we have 70 tax lots that are being remapped from low density to core. So that means that they'll be subject to slightly greater restrictions on development. And then 32 tax lots were moved out of core to low density. So about 3,600 or so acres. And that's just because of kind of the areas slightly shifting with that new collaring data. Wanted to note, so again, just kind of ease in reading this map. So the existing sage grouse habitat area, that's the kind of lighter pastels. And then the new map includes kind of that dotted overlay and then those kind of bolded boundaries. So again, you can see kind of a general shift in those two areas. And then there just really isn't a need for the general habitat anymore. So ODF&W has essentially kind of removed that category. They really only classified them as core or low density. So why I'm here today, because of this Land Conservation and Development Commission hearing on January 23rd, we wanted to provide an update to the board because we will be providing Measure 56 notice. So we received that from DLCD. They will be reimbursing us for sending that mailed notice. But property owners, of course, will be potentially asking questions to staff and to the board. But the board also has the opportunity, if you desire it, to provide testimony at that hearing. So again, within the kind of the parameters of noting that this is directly applied from state law, we don't really have the flexibility to alter it once it's adopted by LCDC. If the board had any concerns, that could be an opportunity to reach out to LCDC about it. But noting that there is kind of that disclaimer that we need to provide some biological evidence to support any map changes that we'd be commenting on. So that's where we essentially are today.
Of the measure 56 letters will go out to the tax lot owners for those 10,878 acres that are new.
It will, we're providing it in consultation with legal counsel. We're providing it to all properties that are currently in the map or the new properties that will be included. So just so that's clear that even if you're being removed, that there is this update process happening. Yeah, we plan to send that out the first week of December. There's a 45-day requirement for that notice. And because we'll also be updating our local map to comply with state law, we're also planning to provide information for the board's hearing date, which we're planning to schedule in early February. So with that, just wanted to know if the board had any questions or if there was a desire to provide comments to LCDC. And in that case, I could collect your comments or come back at a future meeting as well.
I'm curious, how many birds do they call it?
I actually don't have that information.
I mean, I
That's
was
a
just
great-
curious because they're saying, okay, there's been a little shift and I'm just wondering, you know, how many birds you collar so that you actually can recognize that there's a trend.
Yeah, that's a great question. I attended a presentation back in, June, July of 2023, where they described their process. So of course they had kind of a sample size of the colored birds and then basically use that to update their models. But I could reach out to ODFW staff and request that.
I just was curious.
Ballpark would be between 50 and 100.
50 and 100, somewhere in there.
For this area.
Do you want to identify yourself?
Studio.
Well, at the table, so just so we know that you're here.
I just wanted to note, this is a public commenter.
Oh, it
I
is a
believe.
public, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so 50 to 100, and I'll write that down.
I did have a question about this map, so. Am I recalling correctly that to the southwest of these areas, is that federal land?
Yes, yeah, primarily.
So if we're not seeing those federal land areas designated on our map. It doesn't mean that they're not identified as habitat. It's just you're only looking at the private lands.
That's a good question. So what you see on that map, I believe, is all land. I can confirm with our GIS specialist, but that was provided by ODF&W. But I wanted to note that the BLM does have their own sage grouse habitat process. So they've had their own kind of EIS review of sage grouse habitat and restrictions for BLM land.
I'm mentally trying to place where Pine Mountain is here and.
There as well. Yeah, so that's all. This is our current sage grouse combining zone. So just for reference, I mean, this is kind of where you get into Newberry National Monument down here and then Deschutes National Forest. So this is just the information that was provided for ODF&W. So I can double check, but I would assume that maybe they just didn't have mapped habitat for sage grouse in these areas, but I'm happy to reach out to confirm.
I mean, based on the colors, the color on the map, not the shading that we've added, but I mean, it kind of looks like that's the boundary of when you start to get into forests.
Yes.
Does that sound to seem right?
Yeah, and I can turn on our zoning here, so you can see the EFU is kind of that lighter yellow color, and then the green is forest zone property.
Okay. So that probably explains why the habitat only goes to there, because there's sage grouse aren't in the forest, they're out in the open range.
Are there any additional questions?
We sent out notification and answer a bunch of phone calls. Are we getting reimbursed appropriately for that, or how much resources is that? I mean, I'm just thinking, fine, we mail something out, but if it takes a bunch of time. be interesting.
I think that's a good question, Commissioner. I believe that they really only reimburse us for the actual cost of the mailing.
Yeah.
But because we are, initiating our own post-acknowledgement plan amendment process, I'd say that there's a nice kind of crossover where we'd probably be answering questions from property owners anyway about our update process. So I wouldn't say that it's too time intensive, but I did want to note that we did create just a basic website, bit.ly/2024 Sage Grouse, that directs people to DLCD staff, John Jennings, if they had questions on the LCDC process, just to avoid kind of all those phone calls coming to us.
I was just thinking, how much time are we investing in, just so we can understand.
Yeah, I'd say so far, I was tracking this process for the last couple years, but I would say it's not the most time intensive item for staff. Just one of our ongoing responsibilities.
More other questions? That LCDC hearing, December, where will that be?
That would be held in Salem. So I will post, we do have a copy of the Measure 56 notice, which includes information on the hearing room. So I can post that to that website. But yeah, it's located in Salem and there's a virtual attendance option as well.
Then my other question is just about what these Measure 56 notices say. I mean, I was assuming that they would only go to the new people because, I mean, essentially reclassifying these lands can lead to restrictions on development, which is what's subject to a Measure 56 claim, if I understand correctly, right? So if you were already in a mapped area, then why would we send those people to Measure 56 notice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just pulled up the Measure 56 notice so I can kind of read from it, but exactly to your point, this really only notifies people, property owners, that there's a new rule change that may limit or prohibit land uses previously allowed on your property. In consultation with legal counsel, we just felt that more notice is probably better than less notice. So just making people aware of the process, even if their property is again being removed and will not be further limited. So we had kind of a policy option there, and we were pursuing the greater notice than
I mean,
less.
will the letters be different for those three categories? You know, staying in habitat, designated habitat, being added or being removed? I mean, because for the folks who are being removed, you should actually say, you know, this means that you do not have these restrictions anymore. Versus, you know, for folks who are being added, it should say you are facing new restrictions because your area has been added to this.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Our GIS analyst is right now parsing out all the addressing information for that mailing. So, I mean, it's pretty extensive, just kind of noting, already the number of tax lots that are included in the boundary. So I'm not sure that we would be able to efficiently kind of parse out those three different, letters. But I guess, I see I was hoping Stephanie was still behind me. But I think that it is a policy choice if we were to send notice beyond the new property owners that are included in the boundary. So if the board felt that that wasn't necessary, we could potentially only send to those that are newly being included. Will has something to add as well.
Or I mean, another way to handle it would be, I mean, if you only want to send one letter to everybody, if you at least kind of had those explanations, you know, if you're being removed, then this, if you're being added, then this, and just make it clear for them which of those three categories they fall in. Rather than trying to have three different address lists, letters.
Commissioner, your planning manager, Will Groves, for the record, a great point. We'll re-explore this with legal. I had had similar concerns, and there's a general principle in planning that more notice is better. And simpler notice, that has less of kind of getting people in the right list. I'm not sure if all of these divisions are by tax lot or some of them split properties. And so maybe we may be sending different letters to different properties depending on the area. And then at that point, in good faith, we need to send a map specific of the property and say this part of your property might be affected. What we could do is we could probably parse out the people who are either seeing no status change or reduction for the entirety of their tax lot and maybe throw them off the notice list so that we wouldn't have to field calls from them as they're confused by what's happening, which is in fact nothing to them.
Right, I mean, it might just make. This map could probably be a little bit busier and still be clear, but I mean, if there's a way to, keep all this information, just, identify this is what's being added, this is what's being removed. Like eating that out or, putting some hatching on it or something, then it would be easier for people to kind of just figure out.
Yeah, your point's very well taken. I mean, in the end, Nicole's gonna end up fielding these calls, and to the extent that, she's got to tell people that nothing's happening to them. We'd like to avoid those at the outset.
Right. I mean, I would have liked to, like at reading the staff memo, it would have been helpful for me to understand, okay, like what are the parts that are coming out? What's the stuff that's coming in? So just like one more layer of information. If it doesn't make the map too busy.
I think even a separate figure, that map's about as busy as it can be with it being possibly readable.
Yeah.
So maybe an additional figure that shows adds and subtracts separately would be helpful.
Yeah, we can provide kind of the indexed maps that provide kind of that magnified look for a variety of the different areas in this combining zone. So we're happy to do that.
Yeah, just the more, I agree with you, more notice is better, but the more clear it can be, the better what's happening with your property.
And it sounds like there isn't a desire at this time to provide any testimony to LCDC on the map changes. But if there is, please let me know. And I can return at a future meeting.
Any insight into the 3 rural commercial centers? I mean, was that property owner engagement or somebody's decided, oh. I mean, yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah, ODFW explained that as part of their original process last July. They essentially just missed Milliken in the first round. So that's why it was included kind of later on, that removal of that. But essentially, they just had that policy kind of statewide of if there was, an unincorporated community, essentially to carve it out, since there's that status from DLCD and, historic levels of development.
And then I just think of the core habitat area, when we did do a site tour out there a couple years ago. And we see this, I mean, there's a disconnect between what people want to do in the land and what they're allowed to do on their land. It's hard to even get them to understand, you're what, I mean, I just wanted to put my stuff here, and so this is still a collision course with some of the rural property owners.
So I do have a question, Nicole. So we've got this green around here and here, but then the brown line for the entire core habitat. So is that brown line assumed to match that green line? Or it wasn't finished and that's odd, and I'm just going, okay, so I can see that it goes all the way around, but then it's eliminated at one end.
Yeah,
Is there supposed to be a line there?
there's, I think it would be most clear if there was the brown line where it meets the green line.
Yeah.
So that's an easy change we can make.
Okay, I mean, I just like, would maybe like side by side or something.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
okay, I know,
Just make that boundary clear.
yeah, okay. Just from my perspective.
Our population stabilized or going up or going down? Do we have, is that like a front and center information we have?
That's a good question. I believe, I don't have the specific numbers, but I believe that they're stable. I mean, comparatively, Deschutes County, the Lex that we have, there's been a lot of work in Crook County. So there hasn't really been a lot of work on like restoration projects in Deschutes County. So I believe they're pretty stable in Deschutes County. In Crook County, there's a slight increase, and then I'm not sure about the other Eastern Oregon counties.
But you have to think because there were so many fires over there that it had to impact them. I mean, I was like, yeah, it's, look at just next, Kearney County, all those fires. Cause you said what, 7 counties were included with us, so that's another 6 counties.
This question is something we could ask Stu about. Representative. Well, I'm not sure what used to be East Cascade Dog Pond Society.
You can ask him.
Well, how about a thumbs up, thumbs down, or flat? I mean, are they going up, down, or are they stable?
It's kind of tricky this year because they made a strong effort to go out and find new blacks, and they found a bunch of new blacks. So in one sense, they added all those new birds to the list, and you see a little thing going up. But the blacks that they've been monitoring for 30 years went down, so take your pick.
That's good, thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself though for the record for Brenda and our notes?
Stu Garrett, Dr. Stu Garrett, representing the East Cascades Birding Alliance now.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much. Thank you if you'll add that brown line. Okay, we have item number 12 now.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Emily Horton, Program Manager for Environmental Health Preparedness and Engagement. Adria Albin, Environmental Health Supervisor. We are here today to request approval to apply for another funding opportunity for the Environmental Health Department, and details. Perfect. So this is a proposal with the CDC's EHS Net program. They're offering the opportunity to be awarded up to $200,000 per year for a 5-year grant cycle. Each year we would have to apply for a new grant. So this is just an application for 1 year for $200,000. And the EHS Net program has several parts. One is collaboration with other EHS Net participants. Another is to participate in a research project through this grant funding, and to involve some type of investigation of foodborne illness outbreaks. So the project that we're proposing is to do a study of the causes of some of the bigger foodborne illness outbreaks that we're seeing in Deschutes County, which is part of a national trend that address or impact highly susceptible populations. Those are defined as older adults, younger children, or people with compromised immune systems that are more susceptible to foodborne illness. So in effect, in addition to doing foodborne illness regular inspections, we would be collaborating and partnering with Oregon State University to do a study of the causes of some of these outbreaks that affect our highly susceptible populations, and then to develop some type of intervention program and support to try to reduce the foodborne illness disease burden. So the interventions could look like additional training for the staff that work there, and maybe supplementing some of the cost of the training to encourage participation, things like that, that would try to reduce the disease burden. And then if we were able to continue the funding for 5 years, in the last year, we would propose to do a final round of assessments and see if we've made any impact through these interventions that we're trying to implement. So that's the overview of the project. Do you guys have any questions?
So this is it's $200,000 revenue per year. And this is the application process for it. So I mean, you think this is real competitive, other.
Yeah,
health folks?
I do think it's competitive, sure. Yeah, so they have, they're going to award 10 grants this year. So $200,000 per
National.
organization. Yeah, nationally. Yeah. Yeah, actually,
Sure, no problem, let's go for it.
Oregon Health Authority about 15 years ago was awarded one of these grants.
Yeah.
And there are other local health departments that have been awarded them. So it is competitive, but we thought we would give it a
Yeah.
shot.
That's a good plan, though, a good idea.
Piece there, so study the causes, develop the interventions, and then actually implement them and evaluate.
Yes.
So it's kind of a research project, but it's also kind of like a pilot project.
Yeah. Yeah, and what we were thinking about doing is trying to, so many of the facilities that serve these highly susceptible populations aren't regulated. So for example, we do inspections in schools and daycares. We don't regulate them. There's a memorandum of understanding where we kind of contractually do inspections. Similarly, in long-term care facilities, we respond to outbreaks right now, but we don't regulate or inspect them. So this would be to try to develop a model outside of regulation. How can the public health department most meaningfully impact some of these outbreaks that we're seeing?
Of course, and then we have, what is organic carrots that sound like what they were selling in 18 states.
Yeah, they're good for you.
No, one person's already died. Quite a few people have been hospitalized.
Right,
So if you buy organic carrots, you better check them.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can be our myth buster for our next newsletter when we say that, or, you know, fruit and vegetables don't cause outbreaks, which a lot of people think that if they don't eat meat, they don't get sick. But often these E. coli, the big ones, are associated with.
Well, then it was the onions that were on the, in McDonald's. It wasn't the meat, it was the onions.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that was,
There's a lot of these common myth busters that we as EHS.
yeah. Yeah, and that's part of what we'd be trying to do is more education, because sometimes what people think makes them sick isn't actually the riskiest thing that's happening. Yeah, so that education piece is really important.
definitely.
Ask about the FTE implications of this, so we'd be doing this work with existing staff. So it did, we're not gonna be adding staff through this program, but does that, I mean, is the studying, designing of interventions, implementing interventions, is that essentially take capacity away from doing inspections that then the remainder of the inspectors need to absorb? Like, is that kind of adding to everyone else's workload so that you can kind of do this project within existing staff?
Yeah, so this is a great question. The position that we had in mind, so the FTE or the individual we had in mind to do this study is a position currently funded with modernization funding. So they were hired with the intent of doing more than the
Like
basic
this.
inspections.
Okay.
Yes, doing work like this, exactly. Yeah, so we would be shifting around some inspection load, but not a significant amount. Yeah.
Any further discussion?
This
Oh,
is
when
kind
will you find out?
Okay, so the award will be announced to us next summer, and the grant funding cycle actually begins September 30th of 2025. So quite a bit of lead time.
Well, I'm excited to even think like, okay, what could we do? And if we qualify, it's already probably valuable just thinking in that phase about projects and the priorities. So I'll move approval to apply for this environmental health specialist network grant from the CDC.
Second.
Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank
Wasn't
you.
this morning fun?
Oh, lovely.
All right. Oh, my gosh. Okay, I think it looks like the treasury report. Item number 13.
Time for the numbers.
Oh my gosh, looks like the treasurer's report.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. For the record, Bill Coon, Deschutes County Treasurer.
Thanks for allowing me to present the October Treasurers Report. Talk about the events over the last several weeks. Certainly it's been an impactful several weeks with the news of Donald Trump winning the presidential election. Shortly after the election, the stock market experienced what they call the Trump bump, with expectations that his administration would likely focus on reducing regulations and implementing what many would consider to be more favorable tax policies. Ironically, the bond markets also realized a spike in yields, with concerns related to monetary and fiscal policy with tax cuts that could increase our federal borrowings and a potential trade war with China, potentially adding anywhere from 60 to 100% tariffs on imported goods. So kind of a yin and a yang economic impact does some of those actions. With Republicans now in control of all three branches in government, there is hope in Washington that there will be a more streamlined approach to approval of a full year federal budget, which again was we're currently operating under a continuing resolution that funds federal agencies through December 20th. And after that, we have no budget. So with kind of a lame duck in mind is the fact that our legislators actually also need to address the debt ceiling limit, which was suspended on June 3rd of 2023 and goes back into effect on January 2nd, 2025. And ironically, by statute, the Treasury is only required to maintain a standard 1 week cash balance before relying on outside borrowings and revenue inflows. So really critical that they address the debt ceiling issue fairly quickly. And this all is effectively pushing longer term budget discussions until after the election. Again, both parties seem to recognize the challenges associated with potential shutdown, partial shutdown. And so hopeful that both of those two very key issues can be addressed somewhere between December 20th and that first week in January. So again, a couple of things that we want to keep an eye on over the next month to 45 days. So on a yearly basis, some economic data, October CPI rose slightly to 2.6%, up from 2.4% in the previous month, which was slightly higher than forecasted. And again, the primary concern is over persistent pressure on housing costs, which we've talked about before. As expected, the Fed chose to reduce short-term rates by another 25 basis points during its meeting on November 7th. And for the final meeting of the year, which is scheduled over December 17th and 18th, the market now projects roughly a 50-50 probability of a further 25 basis point rate cut. There's concerns that are we really moving inflation in the right direction? And I think the Fed really wants to go slow and be sure before they make any further rate cuts, because it's going to be really difficult to go the other way. And as I've mentioned before, it's really the only tool in their toolbox with regards to abating inflation is to cut rates. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And certainly the meeting minutes that come out of that meeting in December is going to be really telling, I think, for what's going to happen early in 2025. From a manufacturing perspective, the producer price index declined slightly to 2.4% year over year, which actually met analysts' expectations. And flip side of that is the most recent average 30-year mortgage rate jumped to 7.562%, up nearly 1% from mid-October, which has mirrored the increase in the 10-year bond rate. So again,
Isn't
that
that
big jump in rates that we had right after the election have been, it actually occurred several weeks before the election, but continued through the election, has had an extremely negative impact on mortgage rates. So that again is expected to create a little bit of a headwind with regards to mortgage activity and certainly real estate activity in general, which is a huge driver of GDP. So more to come there.
I mean, that's not surprising, right? I mean, the mortgage rates track the bond market. They don't track the.
Well, they
Fed-
do, the 10-year
They don't
bond
track
rate.
the Fed rate.
Yeah, they do not. That's a measurement of short-term rates and really, long-term mortgage rates are primarily tied to what happens on the 10-year bond rate. So, so reinforcing, kind of a continuing challenging housing market, mortgage applications declined 17% month over month. And again, housing has continued to be a drag on GDP growth, but, hopeful that we're gonna start to see some firmer footing here in the not too distant future. Housing starts in October came in at 1.3 million, falling 5% below the projected forecast. And building permits also continue to lag at 1.428 million, annualized down from 1.460, which was forecasted. At a regional level, providing data on several markets here within Deschutes County. Bend single family residential market experienced a jump in median sales price to $800,000 in October, which is actually, it's up from $714,000 in September. And the overall median sales price in Bend now exceeds the yearly high, which previously had been $775,000 in June. It's telling when you kind of dive into those numbers a little bit more in detail. The number of sales virtually matched last month's total, but the number of higher end $1 million plus homes is now roughly a third of total sales in the Bend market. And 38 of those were cash sales. So again, higher median sales price, and again, a lot of those are cash sales, so they're not being influenced by what's happening to mortgage rates. There's now a 3-month supply of homes currently listed for sale, and the days on market is extending out on sold properties. We're now out to 48 days, and that's up from, I think, about 30 days last month. And building permits in the Bend market were flat. Actually, I take that back. They did go up a little bit from September. They were 53 in October, and they were 39 in September. Redmond statistics for the year show a similar trend. Current median sales price is actually over $500,000 now in Redmond, up slightly from $493,000 in September. And Redmond area permits actually jumped quite a bit in October, up to 39 for the month. And they were down to a low of 15 in September. So a slight improvement there. Looking at some of the other markets within Deschutes County, Sisters Market, 702,000 median sales price. Sun River, 790,000. La Pine was 410,000. Sisters and Sun River, there's very light volume. So a couple large sales could really swing those markets one way or the other from a month-to-month basis. But again, it's kind of, when you look at number of sales in Bend and also in Redmond, pretty telling right now as to what's happening in those two markets in particular.
How many months supply in Redmond do you have that down?
Oh, I don't think I put that. It's kind of hovering around the 3-month supply that we have in Bend. It's around 3 months. Yeah, I didn't write
I
that.
think La Pine had gone to like 6 months or something
Yeah,
a month ago.
yeah. So anyway, that's any questions on economic conditions? Hearing none, I'll talk about the October Treasurer's Report. Our portfolio balance for the month jumped to 324 million at month end, which was an increase of 44 million from September. And this jump is obviously primarily due to robust tax collections and the timing of tax turnover. So that was as of October 31st. And then we processed a large tax turnover on Friday, November 1. So again, those numbers are a little bit skewed just because of the timing of tax receipts versus tax turnover. Net investment earnings for the month were 840,000, which was 28,000 higher than last month's earnings. And again, primarily driven by larger portfolio balance for the month. And it's $312,000 higher than a year ago. And again, overall, that's just reflective of the higher rate environment that we're currently in and how we're managing funds and year-over-year growth in the portfolio. All portfolio category balances are well within policy guidelines. The LGIP rate, which was expected, actually dropped from 5.3% in the prior month to 5% at the end of October. It'll be interesting to see what's going on in the short-term bond market and whether or not that continues to decline or kind of stabilizes. But I did expect up until a couple of weeks ago that we'd see further decline in the LGIP rate. Now I'm not so sure. And if I had a perfect crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. So the portfolio has a weighted term to maturity of 0.7 years. Again, that time to maturity is somewhat skewed by dedicated courthouse funding that was invested to match the expected funding need. And then the distribution schedule that I now show in the report actually breaks out that portion of the redemptions that are targeted toward courthouse funding. And just another, kind of side note is I'm going to be investing roughly 40 million this week. That came in through a big influx in tax receipts last week, and should have that redeployed by the end of the week. And positive note is that bond rates have gone back up again, so Deschutes County will benefit by that as well. So what I'm doing right now is kind of filling out the back end of a 3-year maturity ladder. And so really targeting kind of mid 27 to the end of the year in terms of kind of filling out, really targeting redemptions in that $6 to $8 million per month. And so we got to be trading here towards the end of this week. So, any questions on any of that?
So I'd love to get a sense of how our money is growing in relation to the rate of increase in inflation. Or basically, we can look at these numbers and say, 312,000 greater investment income than a year ago. But I mean, with the inflation that we've had, does that kind of like just make us break even, or are we not even keeping up with inflation? Or
well, and again, we've talked internally around kind of the inflation that we've experienced internally. Within Deschutes County, and I would say we're essentially break even or maybe struggling to beat that expectation right now. So we've benefited by higher bond yields, but again, core inflation has been kind of in that mid 2% range. So effective yield, we're beating that inflation number, but not by much. So
thank you. That was exactly what I was.
I think you're spot on. Yeah, and again, we are not active traders in the portfolio. We are seeing a large number of those low yielding investments running off now, which occurred several years ago. And so, you can see with the most recent portfolio yield, we've seen a big jump, actually month to month over the last several months, as we've been able to reap the benefit of higher yielding new investments and seeing some of those older investments run off. So moving in the right direction, but again, our focus is on safety and security. So we're confined. We have pretty narrow guardrails in what we can invest in, and again, we're targeting kind of that 3-year investment window as well. We don't want to invest too far out. Just want to make sure that we've got redemptions available to support ongoing operations.
It was fascinating though, because we had 2 changes in October, the 2nd and the 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
And
It happened, yeah.
normally it doesn't happen in like twice a month. I see it in 23 that it did in January, but
Yeah,
usually, it just,
yes.
it's kind of a little bit inconsistent.
And like I said, I did expect to see another reduction. Our bank, actually, First Interstate Bank, on that kind of 3rd tier that we have, they lowered the rate on that tier to 4.75, and I think it was around 30 to 45 days ago. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but again, their cost of funds, they're looking at managing their balance sheet, trying to, manage, what they're paying out for deposits. But again, I wouldn't be surprised to see another reduction in the LGIP rate, but I also, because that's more of a shorter term rate, I could also not be surprised to see that stabilize a little bit as well.
Well, October 13th of 21, the rate was 0.45. That wasn't very long ago, folks.
Yeah, that hopefully makes you feel a little bit better, but we didn't have the inflation that we
No,
have today.
that's what I
either,
mean.
too.
That's the other side of the
Yeah.
story. So, right.
So anyway,
No,
that's my
thank you so
report.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Robert? Thank you so much.
I have an updated handout for you, which I actually think this is the first time I had to provide updated numbers on the financial report from the original one included in the packet. So, what I handed out, sorry, Robert Tinsel, Chief Financial Officer for the record. Good afternoon, commissioners. What I handed out is just an updated, the summary for all the funds combined together. Really what it was for, and then Fund 274, that's really where it is on the admin fund, and we'll get to that, and I'll point it out when we get there. But there was a consolidation report, you just miss a minus number in there, and so it threw off the admin transfer that they were showing, and so as I was reviewing this later Friday, I finally saw it, but over the weekend, kudos to Cheryl for making the adjustment, and then Casey, a temp help we have, updated the report, so you have the updated numbers right in front of you today, so everyone's right on the ball, so I just want to thank them for their.
Yeah, somebody
last
sent an
minute
email
effort.
out like in the middle of Saturday or something, yeah.
Yeah,
From the finance.
yeah,
Oh,
so.
it was our, the VOCC.
Yeah, Casey Harden.
Yes.
So there's 7 people on our accounting team and we have 3 vacant positions right now. So we are scrambling a little bit, but we were able to hire a former employee as a temp to work part-time for a little bit. And so she was able to step right in, thankfully, and help us in some of the areas. And yeah, the VOCC report was one of them. So
I know, I was like, wow, somebody's working like Saturday night at 5 o'clock or
Yeah.
something, yeah.
yeah, so
Thank
so
you.
we're like, whenever you can fit in work, we'll use you. So she did. Okay, so in front of you, you have the October 2024 financial report. Again, these are unaudited numbers. This is for the period ending October 31st. The highlights on the first page, general fund revenue is 8.6 million or 17.9% of budget. And last year it was 7.4 or 16.6% of budget. But this comparison includes the transfers, which transfers every year, transfers in and transfers out. They can vary by year based on activity. This is transfers to or from other funds. So if you just look at operating revenue, it was 7.4 million last year if you take out the transfer. So revenue is the same as it was last year. Expenditures, 11.9 million at this point, and it was 14.5 million. However, if you take out the transfers for the expenditures last year at this time was 11.5 million. So really, it's essentially a $400,000 increase in operating expenses compared to last year. And with the revenue, a lot of it, especially with the general fund, it's the taxes. So it's just depending on the timing of when the tax revenue comes in. And you see your dashboard there. The next page is the position control summary. Just want to highlight the total here is 10.68% for the first quarter. And again, the last 2 years have been 10.55 and 10.43 for the total year. So again, we're up. It seems like we've calmed a little bit in what we have as far as the vacancy rate overall for the county.
Didn't you just say the last 2 years, it was 10.55 and 10.43?
Yep. I mean, fiscal year 24 was 10.55 and fiscal year 23, 10.43, right, for the total year. So hovering around that 10% number.
So it hasn't really changed that much.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's been
Yeah.
stable as
Got
far
it.
as not.
When
because-
you said tamed, you meant volatility is.
Yes,
Got it,
thank
okay,
you.
got
Yeah,
it.
yeah, because it was as high as 12% or
Right.
14 some months, but now it seems to be around that. I mean, there are still fluctuations. For example, the assessor's office right now at the very top of the line, 18.82% of the percent unfilled. They ended fiscal year 24 at 11.78. So right now they're experiencing a little higher than last year. The DA's office ended last year at 3.67. They're at 4%. So real close. And the total general fund ended last year at 5.96, and the general fund right now is 8.7, so a little higher. But overall for the county, and again, you can look at all the different departments, but we're just hovering around where we've been. Okay, I'm gonna pass by all the departmental pages, and again, you do have a new handout in front of you. The biggest change is mostly in the Fund 274, so you can refer to that in your packet. So I think the page number 278 in your printed copy is the general fund. General Fund 001. As the county treasurer mentioned, he's going to be investing quite a bit this week. Our tax department, tax office staff have been very busy last week. They're still very busy this week. We still have a lot of mail that we're processing as well, but they're doing a great, tremendous job. We've processed probably about 73% of what we would anticipate so far is what we processed, but again, we're still counting typically in November, and again, this report's only for October, but typically in November, we receive about 92 to 94% of tax receipts we receive by November. So we processed already 73% of that, and we're still processing. We still got a ways to go, and those numbers we'll see in November. So on the general fund, property taxes through October was $3.5 million. Last year at October 31st, it was $4 million. However, in fiscal year 23, it was only 2.6 million. So it also, I think, depends on the time, how the days fall. And we're always busier after a weekend. We'll get more mail in after a weekend, and people come in to pay their taxes. So we appear to be on target at this point, so I'm not concerned with the differences in the numbers right now. One thing you will see on that same top line, property taxes, the footnote for A, you see that negative 212,000. This is what I mentioned last month, how the actual assessed value came in lower than we had budgeted. And so that's where you'll see the adjustment of $212,000 that we're expecting to come in less if, everyone pays. Instead of based on the 39.6 million, we're anticipating about 39.4. So a difference of about $200,000 there. And just so you know, I think we've said this number before, but we mailed out over 114,000 tax statements. So there's quite a few transactions that come through that as well. Page 279, next, juvenile fund 030. The biggest change here is the total variance on the very bottom number on the bottom lower right is $1 million. That's their total fund balance greater than they expected, but the majority of that is in their personnel savings. At this point, you'll see with the vacancy rate. So 753,000 is where their projection is savings at this point. And again, we're 1 quarter in plus a month, so we'll see how we end up the rest of the fiscal year. Next page, Fund 160, 170, the TRT funds. So we're good news, bad news, I guess. I'll get bad news first, then I'll give some good news. How's that for a little bit? But so year to date, we are down from last year by 1.1%. So our actuals compared to last year is down 1.1%. Okay, now the good news, since we budget a little more conservatively this year, we're up 1.1% compared to last year. 1% isn't much really, it's like break even either way, but our actuals are down a little bit, but because we lowered our budget, we're doing a little better compared to budget than what we anticipated. But it's still only 1%, we'll see. Hopefully this early snow helps. Hopefully it's a good weekend, Yes, this past weekend.
As long as you have your ski pass for the year.
Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Yeah, if Thanksgiving, we get more. So as we know.
No, that was the #1 visitor site, according to the news this morning as I was driving in. People were coming to bed, so everyone knows that we have stuff.
Yeah, interesting fact, I know you all get the reports as well, but at least so far through the October numbers, the private occupancy has been up a little bit, but the business side had been down. And then in total, it's, about 1% down overall. So maybe, the Airbnbs and such homes fill up first and then commercial. I don't know. I just noticed that trend so far. The private is up while the commercial is down thus far.
And I was told that some people have reduced their rates a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that could make sense.
So,
Fund 255, so page 283, I believe in your packet number there, looking at the sheriff's office numbers. On the middle section for requirements, you will see that they do have a variance in the last column for projections. You might recall last year they only had put the variance in a couple different orgs instead of breaking out where they're truly anticipating the savings to come from for their vacancy savings. So they did update that this month for us. Total requirements, they are projecting a savings of that $3.2 million. And then if you scroll down near the bottom under fund balance, that beginning fund balance line, you can see that they're actually starting the year of 3.2 million better than they thought as well. So in total right now, the projection is the total fund balance, the very bottom number, is they'll end up 6.1 million better than they originally anticipated in their budget, all things being equal. When they come in, so they are experiencing some vacancy savings there.
so what should that number be for their fund number?
Beginning balance 15.5 million.
Right, okay, so it's 15.5, but
Yep.
what is it, do they really need in order to cover those months when, when we start July and we don't get the funding in from the property taxes until October, November?
Yeah,
So is 19 million that's putting them in a way better spot, isn't it?
it is better. Yeah, it is much better spot because out of 20 million or 66 million is their total budget requirements. Plus there's some transfer, but so a quarter of that really is essentially.
Quarter of the 66?
Yeah, because they require 4 months in there. Well, that would actually be 33%, sorry, 4 months, 33.3%,
Okay,
as opposed to 25%,
okay,
which is, close to where they're at.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I can see that the ranch isn't gonna cost as much, so.
So health services, fund 274, and this is page 284. And this is where you can, if you want to refer to the handout that I've given you, or I can point out the difference that we have. This first page here, it's the roll-up summary of their 3 areas, the admin, behavioral health, public health. The in the middle section under requirements, their administration allocation, the bottom line of the total requirements in there. Kind of in the center. The correct number is, the projection is a positive 3.7 million. The incorrect report had a 12.7 million negative. And again, it gets to the transfer, which I'll show you on the next page. And the final number on the bottom, total fund balance, it's a positive projection of 8.7 million or 1.5 greater than what they anticipated. Previously, it was $15 million negative projection, all because of an admin. One number can skew things. So that's why
you don't sleep at night.
Stood up. That's right. So, and I apologize for that. That error wasn't caught sooner. But yeah, update on their fund 270. So currently they have 26.5 million of actual in their reserve. That's the OHP reserve that they have reserved for capital projects and other items. They're projecting by the end of the year at $30.2 million at this point. So the next page, 285, or the second page in the handout, the middle section there, again, under administration, this is where you see in the admin fund, under total requirements, the budget is a negative $15 million. And that's because it's a transfer out essentially. Or actually, sorry, it's a transfer in to help pay for their costs. The projection should be that same budgeted number, but in their first report, it was a net of a 1.3. They had put 1.3 million. So it's really that payment from the other departments to pay for their admin fees. So that's revenue essentially coming in under their expenditure line. Next page, 286, behavioral health. This did not change, so what's in your packet, this will be the same. Just a couple items I want to point out in the middle section there under total requirements, you'll see capital outlay.
They had budgeted $1.9 million. They're only projecting to spend 88,000 now. And as I mentioned in footnote E, it was because originally they had budgeted for those expansion in the Lapine area for a new site. But they're not anticipating those expenditures during fiscal year 25, so they adjusted that number. So that is positive for the fund of $1.8 million. And then the next line down, transfers in OHP, they're projecting less transfers in that they'll need into this fund because they're spending less. And so those numbers change. So, but at the end, about $600,000 difference from what they originally budgeted is where we'll end up in that fund. Public health, 274, essentially, and there was no change from the previous draft, and it was similar to last month as well. Next page, 288, community development, 295. The top part is resources for Fund 295. And there's that footnote E on all the revenues, and that's as a result of them coming to the board and asking for fee increases that the board approved. This is the first month now that it reflects the increased revenue. And so the revenue projection increased about $100,000 from what it was before as a result of the new fee increases. And their total requirements, they're anticipating about $100,000 under from what the budget is there. Overspent. Their projection, they still target $1 million is what they are, and this reflects that. As they stated in the reports, the permit and application volumes align with the 2015 to 2017 numbers that they experienced then. But they did say consistent activity in single family dwelling permits and applications and site evaluations that they experienced, but otherwise it's the rest is volumes are within that 2015 to 2017 time period. Road Fund 325, page 289. There was little change from last month. Their $1 million over projection over their 3.4 that they anticipated. Here it's on target what they anticipated last month. Same with adult parental probation, so I'll skip through a few pages. If it's similar to what it was last month, then nothing new to highlight there. Same with solid waste. Fair and Expo, page 294. Line 615. Their requirements, although it's not that much different, but their projections on their total requirements decreased now to year end 4.2. So they're having a higher vacancy savings built in there now from what they're anticipating. Last month they reported they thought their expenses would be 4.6. So now it's only 4.2. So that's a savings of about $400,000. So their year end total fund balance now projection is at 288,000 or 163,000 more than they budgeted. Last month, they were only anticipating a $45,000 increase, so their projections now are a little more favorable than they were last month, based on current activity. The other funds were the same or very little change from last month as well. And then our second to last fund, I'll move all the way to Health Benefits Fund 675, page 301 in your packet. So this is the same thing. The revenue now includes the adjustments as a result of EVAC, the recommendations from EVAC, and then the board approved the changes with some of the plan design changes, which also included the prescription rebate changes, and then also some of the changes on the expenditures. So total resources, the projection for revenues are now 4.6 million, which is about 200,000 more than it was last month when we reported. And that's as a result of anticipating additional prescription rebates. And also as we look at the interest, it's earning a little more interest. So those numbers have been updated as well. On the requirement side, we are still anticipating that the health benefits will be spending more on the claims than what we originally had budgeted. However, the Deschutes on-site pharmacy, you will see that we'll be spending less than we budgeted there. So it's about
$5 million over what we had originally budgeted there. But the projection of 38.8 million is 1 million less than we had last month. Saying that last month, as a result of the changes through the EVAC. So in total now, down at the very bottom, total fund balance, we are projecting the fund balance to end at 7.7 million as we get closer to that $8 million target. Year to date, so far, our actuals, we've increased 500,000 over last month. So the trend at this point is looking good. Last month, we thought our projection was only 6.4 million. So now we bumped it up to 7.7 million, 1.3 million increase. So, which is good news for the fund. We hope the trends continue moving in those positive ways. And based on our actions that the board took, that helps the fund and the plan design and the savings. So we're moving forward there. And the final fund, 911, 705, 710. Same as last month, little change. Overall, basically their biggest savings is in their personnel cost of 700,000. So that's how they'll end up a little better than they budgeted by $1.8 million. Any other questions on the overall financial reports? Okay.
Thank you very much for being so thorough on that. And, having the whole big picture in your head, knowing to look for those little items on some of them.
Yeah, should have caught it a little sooner, but
No,
but I didn't, but
that's value though. We found it, multiple eyes on it.
yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so other items?
Get one,
Okay.
a draft letter for the board's consideration. Regarding federal funding. Thanks to Jen for coordinating with Prince Jody on the letter. One that Chris said, is the one Chris said the final version?
Yeah,
Okay,
with the tracking.
yeah, great.
So you want to lead it off, or you want me to?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. For the record, Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. So last week on the evening of Tuesday, November 12th, the US Senate unanimously passed the Secure Rural Schools Reauthorization Act of 2023. Now there's a deadline looming according to NACO on the 20th of this month for the US House to pass that reauthorization act in order to get that funding. Chris Doty has been the lead on this, but I think he's out this afternoon and was unable to attend, but his information is that Representative Benz is supportive of this, but at this time, Representative Chavez de Remer's support is unknown. But there is a recommendation to, if the board is in support, write a letter to both of our US representatives encouraging them to take this up and pass this within the deadline before the.
We actually have more than 200,000. We have 208,000 residents.
I'll change that. That was the Google search for me.
Anyway,
I'll just say over 200,000.
yeah,
Okay.
it's over, not yes, definitely.
Thank you.
I'm supportive of this letter. I know SRS isn't as impactful for Deschutes County as it is for some of our other rural county state. But it is part of Memphis.
$600,000, nothing to sneeze at.
Great.
I'm supportive as well.
Great. So if I make that one minor change, we'll get that routed for signature this afternoon and hopefully get those out soon.
And we definitely should ask Chavez to return.
Yep. And Chris said if there's any individual outreach that the commissioners would like to do to that office, that would be also encouraged as well.
Yes, I just forwarded the resubmittal by the building department for the 20 million for South County to Congressman Benz's chief of staff. And yeah, because last time I don't think they said, you know, hopefully it'll help having someone's name on it.
Great.
So for the minutes, I'll make a motion to sign the letter for supporting Secure Rural Schools reauthorization.
That one edit of cutting out almost 200,000. Same.
Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair will check. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Jen. Robbing the door when you go out, just kicking that little stopper out.
I've got another item I was
Close it, yeah, okay.
selected for jury duty, right during the holidays though, so it might work out well for our meetings, but starting the 23rd of December.
Oh,
So,
you'll be so lucky. That's the one time of year you want to have it because they'll never, it won't. it won't-
well, yeah, so it may work out well, or
Yes,
we'll see.
that's usually what.
2 week
once you
period,
request.
starting the 23rd. That's all.
Okay, so I have a question. This is about the Leona Park that's owned by Alpine Parks. Apparently the bridge or the gate was approved for our road department over on this spot, but they've had the road or the bridge, the gate over here, and they need to move it, and your neighbors came and asked if we could do that, and here's the original approval. So that come from our road department then, it's on Leona Park, and what happens is they took a gate out. And then what happens is all kinds of people are driving, the park is actually closed for the winter, but people are driving up and they're leaving their litter and all kinds of things, and the people that were here with the baby originally live right there, it's their house right here, and it's a bit of a nightmare, so they're trying to get the gate back to where it was with the road.
I talked to one of the board members of the park district recently, he asked me, what's going on with this gate? And I said, well, I kind of know about that, because this has gone on for a while now. Resident in the area put that gateway up at the intersection, and it's not authorized to be. So it's up to the park board just to take action on the official location of the gate. And that was years ago that it was done, and then the last board just stopped fighting at some point.
It was approved in 18.
But yeah, and the resident that lives there is just ballistic about having to live there in a beautiful place with a public park behind them. And it's just a full-on conflict situation. But that's the park board to pick up, and I mean, I'll support it and I'll try to make it the best we can, and I always have. But as I say, if the park district wasn't engaged in that for the last few years, but now the current board is gonna get engaged with that.
Okay, so. Okay. Oh, let's see, oh, and then we had another situation from this weekend, and I'm still waiting to hear back from Peter regarding a project in Sisters, and hopefully, have you heard anything, Nick, about basics? Anything's happening?
That's just, we just met Peter a couple of
Okay.
hours ago.
Okay, all right, so they know, yeah, Basics wants to do a 27 employee project in Sisters in a building that's been empty for a couple of years, and so trying to accomplish that as fast as we can. And I know we're dotting all the i's and everything, so hopefully something good's gonna happen there. Oh, and then we did have behavioral health on Friday, and I was really glad Holly was here today, because originally she was talking about only doing like 5 beds for youth. And because this can serve all of Eastern Oregon, after hearing what the Kids Center does for the community. It's really great that they're now realizing that 15 beds makes much greater sense, and part of the facility would be for like day use too, not just youth that need a really helpful place to be able to stay and not have to go to Portland. So it would be so much better for parents in the long run. Anyway, it sounds like we are making progress there, so I'm very happy to hear that. Anything else, Commissioner Chang?
I'll just share, on Thursday, I went to the open house at the Best Care Addiction Medicine Treatment Center clinic that they opened on 3rd, and it's really exciting to hear about the impact that medication assisted treatment is having on substance use disorders in our community. They've had a lot of success, helped a lot of people move to get to a better place, and if not be complete complete with recovery, at least be several steps along the way with their recovery. On Friday, the Bend MPO Policy Board met, and one item of interest for the Board of Commissioners is that we've talked about the boundary, MPO boundary in the Tumalo area. On my requests, some CDD staff worked with some of the MPO staff to do public outreach in Tumalo on the boundary and to help people understand what it means to be part of within the MPO boundary, what it doesn't mean, and gathered input from people. So there was a little bit more positive or supportive comments, like 15 or 16, for being included in the MPO boundary. Then there were people who didn't want to be included. A lot of the people who didn't want to be included, their reasoning that they gave were based on misinformation. I don't want to be incorporated into the city of Bend. We're not incorporating anybody into the city of Bend. I don't want to be taxed. I don't want Cascades East Transit to be, I don't want to be included in Cascades East Transit. So there's just a lot of the folks who didn't want to be included in the MPO didn't really understand what the MPO was. So based on that information, and the majority of the comments being supported, the MPO Policy Board considered whether to shrink the boundary of the MPO, keep it the same, or even expand it to the whole Tumalo unincorporated community, and the decision was to just keep it the same. Not make it bigger, but also not to retract it either. And one of the key benefits of keeping it where it is that if the MPO may be a very valuable conduit for getting funds to complete that paved path that right now runs down to Old Bend Redmond Highway from Highway 97, but to continue that down to Tumalo at some point in time in the future. So that's basically the main argument for being included in the MPO, is it gives you access to additional federal funds. But I asked for MPO staff or CED staff to actually come back and give a report and then go through the feedback with you a little bit more in depth and show you the maps, but that's just a preview of how that discussion went. Tonight there's a regional housing council meeting.
Okay, so I did have the Sun River Chamber Thursday morning. Chief Lopez is actually working with Blackbutte on their hiring for Blackbutte Ranch for their operation there. So it was interesting hearing how our community always works together. Then we had the Health Council meeting Thursday also. They were working on mission and funding, and exactly they did announce grants Friday for some projects. So that was good to know that they're reevaluating exactly where's the money going and if they're giving out small grants or not. I told them that the $547,000 that we originally received for the stabilization center were really critical in just putting that into motion. And that was, that was definitely a great spend. And then we had a COAC meeting at the end of the day, and Senator Gorsuch was on that call and did reconfirm for studies. Number one worry is that the state ODOT is going to want to leave the 50-30-20 funding, and he said no, that he really thinks that's important to keep that ratio that we've had historically. And also Clear Alliance did a presentation on marijuana and what's going on, and hopefully we can get a copy of that and get that to the other commissioners, because that was an excellent presentation too. So yeah, because we have done funding or and what they're seeing is, yeah. And I do know now that we have almost 12 drug recognition experts in our community between the state police, Redmond, Bend, and Deschutes County. So drug recognition experts, that's what you really need now. Because you could miss the signs. So I think that's it. Do we now have an executive?
We do.
Okay.
You have two executive sessions, first.
So I've just got a couple other meetings that I can mention here real quick before we go there. Yeah, you saw me ready to say something. So the COIC board meeting, I didn't mention this last week, but that was the Thursday before. And we did receive the Citizens Assembly recommendations on youth homelessness. And Max was front and center, Shane's son, doing those recommendations. So it was really the first time that they provided them to a public body. COIC proper, we just received them, so we haven't analyzed it or responded or anything. We'll also receive those here at the board of commissioners and the city of Bend City Council. Last Friday was Skills Trade Fair, Skills Trades Fair at the fairgrounds, so a bunch of high school students learned about all kinds of career opportunities. Oregon Living with Fire, remember, is our partnership, Tri-County Forest Service puts dollars in there and was at the meeting with us. And it's really connecting us to that national cohesive strategy. It was kind of a reintroduction meeting because everybody went their own ways with such a big fire season. That was kind of what we ended up doing there. And then I was able to run a quarterly SIC meeting last week also. That's public safety communications folks from around the state. It was fully virtual, so I was here doing that. Just a couple of things that were on my calendar last week. Thank you.
So how long do we expect this to take?
This will be short and.
And then we have we have a couple and two.
But they're all
couple, but we should hopefully we'll be finished by 3:30.
Okay, no, because I just have to call because my vehicle is at,
Oh, yes, yes.
and I have to call the shuttle because my Uber is not working on my phone. It's an exciting life. Just wanted to make sure that I could call them and say, maybe could we just have 1 second? I'll go call them and ask them if they can maybe come in.
Yeah.
Need to log into the Zooms, maybe if Kim
Yeah.
can read and then we'll
Yep.
pause while we.
Yeah,
transition.
good, that would be great. And I'll say if they could maybe come by 3:45 or something.
All right, real
I
quick.
can pray, right?
The Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660 subsection 2D and E, which allows the board to meet in executive session in order to discuss labor negotiations and also real property negotiations. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made in executive session. At the conclusion, we will open the doors and invite the audience back to the meeting.
Okay, so we are now closing down temporarily. Okay, I'll be right back.